Hello, everyone. I'm Rob Aubin. I'm Director of Engineering at OOMP. We're a digital services agency that is headquartered here in Providence, and we have a distributed team. So I'm here to talk about our keynote speaker. I had the distinct honor of introducing Whitney Hess. Whitney was a prominent UX consultant for over a decade, and then became an executive coach in 2014. She's done a lot of work in the Drupal community over the course of the years in those roles. And she's here to talk to us today about Drupal as a digital public good, and has made some connections about what that means for all of us, how it will benefit us, and how we can all take some personal responsibility over the work there. So please join me in welcoming Whitney Hess.
Thank you so much, Rob. I am so honored to be here. Thank you to John, to Leslie, to all of the NEDCamp organizing committee, all of you for being here. I'm just so impressed that we are celebrating 10 years. So congratulations to everyone who made that happen. Yeah. So I'm noticing my jitters are coming up a little bit, so I'm just going to name that. I'm getting a little bit of dry mouth, so I'm going to have my water here. And feeling really grateful to have the opportunity to share some things that are important to me today. All right. So, hi, this is me. Again, my name is Whitney Hess. I have played a lot of different roles in the Drupal community over the years. I have done UX consulting on Drupal.org. It was a content strategy and redesign in 2014 to 2015. I was a keynote speaker at DrupalCon Los Angeles in 2015, tremendous honor. I have done UX consulting and executive coaching with Palantir, who you may know, and I led the community mediation and facilitation that we did in 2017 at DrupalCon Baltimore and in the months that followed. And I have also done executive coaching with staff at the Drupal Association. So I have been involved in kind of different angles and seen different facets to what the Drupal project and the Drupal community is all about. It is awesome to be here in Rhode Island, which I got to drive here, which is unusual for me. I am a native New Yorker, but I live in Cape Elizabeth, Maine, just outside of Portland, if you've ever been up that way. And it's where Fort Williams Park is, which is known for the Portland headlight, which George Washington commissioned, and is supposedly the most photographed lighthouse in the United States. So you might have seen it before. Anyway, come visit us sometime. But I have to start with a disclaimer for today. I am not an expert in anything that I'm about to share with you. This is all stuff that I'm in the midst of learning about and want to share with you what I've learned so far. So basically, this is going to be a link dump. I am going to be sharing with you all of my open tabs for the last 6 months. And there's going to be lots of QR codes throughout, so you can pull those links down for yourself if you really want them. I am here in an attempt to connect the dots between these 4 statements and make a case for where I'd like to see us as the Drupal community focus our efforts next. So we'll start in talking about Drupal as a public good, and then how that connects to Drupal being a digital public good, how that connects to Drupal advancing the Sustainable Development Goals, and then how I want us to help make the Drupal community advance the inner development goals. So let's see how I do with that. So first, the very first mention of Drupal as a public good was in the Dries note at DrupalCon Amsterdam 2014. And in that talk, Dries goes into a very in-depth academic explanation of how he came to learn more about public goods and where they come from. And he gives this explanation of essentially how roads were started by volunteers, making paths to get from point A to point B. And then those paths were improved by businesses, which eventually become bigger roads, and then they're paved, and the community benefits. And then they put tolls on them, and not everyone can use them anymore. And then eventually the roads deteriorate, and the infrastructure that has been created deteriorates, and then the government steps in and takes over ownership and maintains them, and then makes them sustainably accessible for all. So ultimately, that road, which was a path started by volunteers, becomes this public good. And he does a much better job of explaining it than I just did, so you can scan this QR code and watch that Dries note if you'd like. So there are lots of examples of what public goods are. We just talked about roads. There's schools, public schools, parks, street lights, lighthouses, as we all have the logo of the New England NEDCamp. Lighthouses are a classic example of a public good. You could not possibly charge all of the ships that are passing them and using them as navigation for their use, right? Beaches, trails, both of which we have a lot of in Cape Elizabeth, clean air, national defense, even fireworks are examples of public goods. Are there any others that you can think of? Did I hear something?
Water treatment.
Water treatment, that's a great example. Sanitation, in some places is a public good, of course we know, in a lot of places it isn't. So how public goods are defined is that they must meet these two conditions: that anyone can use them for free with no permission needed, which is non-excludable, and that one person's use does not reduce availability to anyone else, which means non-rivalrous. So do we agree that Drupal meets these two conditions?
Yes.
Okay, I'm hearing yeses. So that was Dries' argument back in 2014, and the next three slides are his. And this QR code down there goes to his slide deck that you can see. He wrote about this again in 2019 in a blog post titled Balancing Makers and Takers to Scale and Sustain Open Source. And so he makes this argument that nobody can stop you from using Drupal, and my use of Drupal won't prevent your use of Drupal. Therefore, it fits the definition of a public good. He goes on to explain that there's this natural progression that occurs where an effort starts with volunteers trying to meet their direct needs, providing a service to communities. Businesses come in and formalize and strengthen and mature those services, and then eventually government takes over the maintenance and repair, providing much greater access, or in other words, invention, product, utility. It's technological progress. We've seen it a lot. And so Dries makes this case that Drupal has gone through this progression and it has gotten to the stage where it can now be seen as a utility, a public good. So that was 2014. It was 8 years later, this time last year, that Daniel Cawthron, do any of you know him? He tweeted, "Drupal folks, I think Drupal could be considered a digital public good. Would anyone be interested in putting together an application with me?" And this Twitter conversation became a project to apply for Drupal to be recognized as a digital public good. Does everyone know this already, or am I sharing new information to anyone? New information? Okay, I'm glad that I'm here then. Thank you. I was being kept up at night thinking, but what if everyone knows this? Okay, so a big conversation ensues. Anoop John comes in and said, you know, wouldn't any GP-led software qualify as one? Tim Lennon comes in. Daniel Cawthorn asks, should I put together a Google Doc for drafting? All the, you know, people get involved, even Dries comments, and the following then occurs. So to back up just a little bit, what a digital public good is it's a designation that is offered by a group called the Digital Public Goods Alliance. And they describe themselves as a multi-stakeholder, United Nations endorsed initiative that facilitates the discovery and deployment of open source technologies, bringing together countries and organizations to create a thriving global ecosystem for digital public goods, helping to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, they're not a legal entity, but an initiative that's jointly supported by co-hosting entities, the Norwegian Agency for Development Cooperation, or NORAD, the United Nations Development Program, UNDP, and UNICEF, who ensure that the Digital Public Goods Alliance is adequately staffed and resourced and operates in a transparent and participatory way, given its commitment to open source. So what makes a digital public good? Open source software, open data, open AI systems, open content collections that adhere to privacy and other applicable laws and best practices, do no harm by design, and help attain the Sustainable Development Goals. They are in the midst, the Digital Public Goods Alliance, of trying to ensure that digital public goods with high potential of addressing critical development needs and urgent global challenges are discoverable, sustainably managed, and accessible for government institutions and other relevant implementing organizations, that UN institutions, multilateral development banks, and other public and private institutions that are of high relevance for the implementation of digital technologies in countries that have the knowledge, capacity, and incentives to effectively promote and support adoption of digital public goods, government institutions that have the information, motivation, and capacity to effectively implement digital public goods, and countries that have vibrant commercial ecosystems in place to create, maintain, implement, and incubate digital public goods locally. So this is a really lofty goal that they support. And so the qualifications for designation are these 9 standards, 9 with a part A, B, and C. And they are relevance to Sustainable Development Goals, use of approved open licenses, clear ownership, platform independence, documentation, mechanism for extracting data, adherence to privacy and applicable laws, adherence to standards and best practices, no harm by design, data privacy and security, inappropriate and illegal content, and protection from harassment. So at the time that that Twitter conversation was taking place a year ago, just about now, Farm OS, which is a Drupal distribution for agricultural management, planning, and record keeping, had actually already been designated as a digital public good. So there was a pretty good likelihood that Drupal qualified. So they created a governance issue, to apply for designation as a digital public good. And as the way all things happen in Drupal, these fine people came together and collaborated and contributed. They created a Google Doc that was formed by Anoop John, and all those folks, plus more, pulled together all the content that was needed for the submission, for the application. And then once they pulled that content together, they looped in Tim Lennon, who's CTO of the Drupal Association, as the primary point of contact for the submission. He came in to review it and made a bunch of improvements, and then others continued to comment on the doc, and then when they felt that they were ready to submit, they brought in Dries to do a final approval, and the Drupal Association CEO, Tim Doyle, for a final approval, and then they submitted it. So that was November of last year. They submitted March 28th, 2023, so just this past March. And by April 12th, the application was approved, and Drupal was formally designated as a digital public good. Couple places where this was covered, the drop times and on the Drupal Association blog, kind of a press release here, so you could check those out if you're interested. So now Drupal has its own page on the registry of digital public goods, and you can check out all the other designated open source technologies, software, content, data, and standards that have received their designation. And there's also a cool data viz on how they all align with which of the Sustainable Development Goals. Well, why does any of this matter? So in that initial Twitter thread, Mike Herschel's disembodied head asked, would there be any additional benefits for Drupal short of being on the list? And Daniel Cothran replied with thinking, because he works in public health, which is donor-driven. Donors are aware of these digital public goods, and when they put out RFPs for organizations to do work on them or use digital public goods, so there are some inherent benefits, but really the way that it benefits us and our organizations and our clients is that Drupal is seen as addressing critical development needs and urgent global challenges. And that it's discoverable, it's sustainably managed, it's accessible for government institutions and other implementing organizations. It's seen as a preferred technology platform for countries and companies actively creating, maintaining, implementing, and incubating digital public goods. That is really cool. Now, you've heard me mention the Sustainable Development Goals several times now, and it is in fact the #1 indicator requirement for designation as a digital public good. It must demonstrate relevance to advancing the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs. And in the digital public goods submission that the contributors put together, they had to include all of the ways that Drupal supports the Sustainable Development Goals. It's a hefty section of the document, which of course you can see with the QR code. They go into great detail into all of the ways that the Drupal project itself advances the SDGs and the way in which Drupal empowers other organizations and agencies to advance the SDGs. And on the D.O sustainability page, has anyone ever gone to that? There is explicit mention of Drupal's commitment to advancing the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. In fact, as an aside, there's a long-standing Drupal connection to the United Nations. The UNESCO site, the Global Deb Hub, which is an online community of international development practitioners and professionals, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, and the Sustainable Development Goals website itself, as well as many others, are all on Drupal. And as of the last time I checked, which was like yesterday, there are 37 people at the UN with profiles on D.O. So let's talk about the SDGs. Who has heard of these before? Okay, maybe 50-50, a few tentative hands. So what are the Sustainable Development Goals? Well, in the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, which was adopted by all United Nations member states in 2015, there is a shared blueprint for peace and prosperity for people and the planet, now and into the future. At the heart of this are 17 Sustainable Development Goals, which are an urgent call for action by all countries, developed and developing, in a global partnership. They recognize that ending poverty and other deprivations go hand in hand with strategies that improve health and education, reduce inequality, and spur economic growth, all while tackling climate change and working to preserve our oceans and forests. There's a whole timeline that you can read about how these member states came together and negotiated this and actually made this happen, starting back in 1992. And if you scan that QR code, it will take you to that origin story. So I'm going to name all 17 of these SDGs and their definitions. And as I'm reading through these, think about how they might apply to the work that you do, what you're passionate about, where you see Drupal potentially playing the biggest role, okay? So goal 1, end poverty in all its forms everywhere. Goal 2, end hunger, achieve food security, and improve nutrition, and promote sustainable agriculture. Goal 3, ensure healthy lives and promote well-being for all and at all ages. Goal 4, ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. Goal 5, achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls. Goal 6, ensure availability and sustainable management of water and sanitation for all. Goal 7, ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all. Goal 8, promote sustained, inclusive, and sustainable economic growth, full and productive employment, and decent work for all. Goal 9, build resilient infrastructure, promote inclusive and sustainable industrialization, and foster innovation. Goal 10, reduce inequality within and among countries. Goal 11, make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. Goal 12, ensure sustainable consumption and production patterns. Goal 13, take urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts. Goal 14, conserve and sustainably use the oceans, seas, and marine resources for sustainable development. Goal 15, protect, restore, and promote sustainable use of terrestrial ecosystems, sustainably managed forests, combat desertification, halt and reverse land degradation, and halt biodiversity loss. Goal 16, promote peaceful and inclusive societies for sustainable development, provide access to justice for all, and build effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions at all levels. And Goal 17, strengthen the means of implementation, and revitalize the global partnership for sustainable development. Now, there are specific targets within each goal, many of them. If you dig into any one of these individual goals, you could see specifically what the aim is to achieve by 2030. And now that I've said all of that out loud, it's pretty remarkable that a governing body that has its number one determination of whether it designates something is if it advances the Sustainable Development Goals, and it decided that Drupal does. Like, can we just feel, I have chills thinking about that. That's pretty major. So, do your companies or clients align with the SDGs? Anyone's? I'm not seeing any hands. Which ones do you personally feel most compelled to reach? It's something really worth thinking about. I think mine are probably goal 3, 4, 5, 8, and 16. You may not be surprised to hear there has been a severe lack of progress on the SDGs since 2015. In a report titled Times of Crisis, Times of Change, Science for Accelerating Transformations to Sustainable Development, the 2023 Global Sustainable Development Report, published in September, just a couple months ago, finds that at this critical juncture, midway to 2030, incremental and fragmented change is insufficient to achieve the SDGs in the remaining 7 years. Implementation of the 2030 Agenda requires the active mobilization of political leadership and ambition for science-based transformations. This must be achieved globally, leaving no country, society, or person behind. And the report is an invitation to embrace transformations with the urgency needed to accelerate progress towards the SDGs. To give you a sense of where we are in this conversation, in a report published last month by researchers in Saudi Arabia at the King Abdullah University of Science and Technology and the King Abdullah Petroleum Studies and Research Center, they said last month, in this critical juncture, Saudi Arabia faces a momentous choice to adapt and innovate in the face of climate adversity or suffer the severe and potentially irrevocable consequences of inaction. It's terrifying, isn't it? I mean, I'm terrified. Now, to be perfectly clear, in case anyone is wondering, this is not a matter of not having the science or the technology to fix these problems. It's a people problem. No matter what the problem is, it's a people problem. Thank you, Gerald Weinberg, computer scientist and author of my favorite, The Secrets of Consulting, for this gem. It is 100% a people problem. No one is disputing this. So in order for us to be a public good, we have to do good, and we have to be good. We have to uphold this principle of do no harm. We have to do something. And here's the something. There is an emerging movement, a global movement, that is trying to do something about this, and it's called the Inner Development Goals to complement the Sustainable Development Goals. Progress towards sustainable development has been limited in part by inattention to the human inner capacities required to meet collective global challenges. Founded in 2020, just 3 years ago, the Inner Development Goals, or IDGs, is a not-for-profit, open-source organization with a mission to inspire and equip individuals, organizations, and governments to make a significant difference to sustainable development through cultivating inner capabilities. The hypothesis underpinning the project is that since the world's dominant culture focuses on outer resources for societal flourishing, particularly when it comes to human development, investment in supporting and integrating inner development with leaders and influencers has the potential to be an important catalyst to addressing global challenges and to achieving the UN's SDGs. An increasing amount of research has demonstrated how development of individual and collective capabilities are critical factors in achieving a sustainable future. These capabilities include systems thinking, futures thinking, values thinking, strategies thinking, as well as skills that emphasize the implementation, interpersonal, and intrapersonal relations, and integration and well-being. Evidence is showing the need for individuals and teams to develop these competencies in order to become effective change agents for social transformations towards sustainability. So the Inner Development Goals is a nonprofit and open source framework and toolkit. They have a board of directors, a leadership team and organization staff, scientific advisory board, academic partners, corporate partners, local leaders, and volunteer co-creators, a lot like the Drupal project. It was founded by 3 partner organizations in Sweden. The initiative's IP and finances are within and wholly managed through its own separate foundation. And everything is free and open source and co-created. The library of tools and resources and the community website are all on GitHub under AGPL and Creative Commons Attribution Share Alike licenses. You can freely use the framework, no permission or involvement needed, which is cool because most inner development frameworks out there, especially in the coaching space, are proprietary, and you have to be trained and certified to utilize them. So there's this connection that is being made between the SDGs, our external challenges, and the IDGs, our internal capacities. So what can we, as individuals, teams, and organizations do to be more effective in the work towards greater sustainability and well-being for our planet and our communities? Just want to do a check-in. Does everyone feel like maybe this is important? Okay. Okay, great. I'm glad I'm among like-minded, like-hearted people. So this is the IDG framework as it stands today. There are 5 dimensions and 23 skills across those 5 dimensions. The 5 dimensions are being, thinking, relating, collaborating, and acting. And as I take you through the details of these dimensions and their skills, and the definitions of those skills, notice which ones interest you the most. Where do you notice yourself getting curious? Where do you notice yourself getting triggered? Try to pay attention to those cues as we go through them. So the first dimension is being, and the definition of the being dimension is cultivating our inner life and developing and deepening our relationship to our thoughts, feelings, and body help us be present, intentional, and non-reactive when we face complexity. Anyone think they could use more of this in their lives? Okay. And the 5 skills that are contained within this dimension are inner compass, integrity and authenticity, openness and learning mindset, self-awareness, and presence. So I'm going to take you through each definition. For inner compass, this is having a deeply felt sense of responsibility and commitment to values and purposes relating to the good of the whole. Integrity and authenticity is a commitment and ability to act with sincerity, honesty, and integrity. An openness and learning mindset is having a basic mindset of curiosity and a willingness to be vulnerable and embrace change and grow. Self-awareness is the ability to be in reflective contact with our own thoughts, feelings, and desires, having a realistic self-image, and an ability to regulate oneself. And then the last skill in the being dimension is presence, an ability to be in the here and now without judgment and in a state of open-ended presence. Next, we have the thinking dimension. And this is defined as, and I didn't say before, the being dimension are emotional skills, and thinking dimension is cognitive skills. Developing our cognitive skills by taking different perspectives, evaluating information, and making sense of the world as an interconnected whole is essential for wise decision making. And there are 5 skills in this dimension: critical thinking, complexity awareness, perspective skills, sense making, and visioning. Critical thinking are skills in critically reviewing the validity of views, evidence, and plan. Complexity awareness is the understanding of and skills in working with complex and systemic conditions and causalities. Perspective skills are skills in seeking, understanding, and actively making use of insights from contrasting perspectives. Sense making are skills in seeing patterns, structuring the unknown, and being able to consciously create stories. And the last skill in the thinking dimension is visioning, long-term orientation, and ability to formulate and sustain commitment to visions relating to the larger context. Then we have the third dimension, which is relating, caring for others and the world. And there are 4 skills in this dimension: appreciation, connectedness, humility, and empathy and compassion. And this dimension is defined as appreciating, caring for, and feeling connected to others, such as neighbors, future generations, or the biosphere, and which help us to create more just and sustainable systems and societies for everyone. Appreciation is defined as relating to others and to the world with a basic sense of appreciation, gratitude, and joy. Connectedness is having a keen sense of being connected with and or being a part of a larger whole, such as a community, humanity, or global ecosystem. Humility is being able to act in accordance with the needs of the situation without concern for one's own importance. And the final skill in the relating dimension is empathy and compassion, the ability to relate to others, oneself, and nature with kindness, empathy, and compassion, and address related suffering. 2 more dimensions to go through here. The collaborating dimension is about social skills, and there are 5 skills in this dimension: communication skills, co-creation skills, inclusive mindset and intercultural competence, trust, and mobilization skills. And the definition of the collaborating dimension is to make progress on shared concerns. We need to develop our abilities to include, hold space, and communicate with stakeholders with different values, skills, and competencies. The definition of communication skills is an ability to really listen to others, to foster genuine dialogue, to advocate for our own views skillfully, to manage conflicts constructively, and to adapt communication to diverse groups. Co-creation skills are skills and motivation to build, develop, and facilitate collaborative relationships with diverse stakeholders, characterized by psychological safety and genuine co-creation. Inclusive mindset and intercultural competence is a willingness and competence to embrace diversity and include people and collectives with different views and backgrounds. Trust is the ability to show trust to create and maintain trusting relationships. And the last skill in the collaborating dimension are mobilization skills. Skills in inspiring and mobilizing others to engage in shared purposes. And then the final dimension, the 5th dimension, is acting, enabling change, which includes courage, creativity, optimism, and perseverance, and is defined as qualities such as courage and optimism help us acquire true agency, break old patterns, generate original ideas, and act with persistence in uncertain times. So these 4 skills are courage, the ability to stand up for values, make decisions, take decisive action, and, if need be, challenge and disrupt existing structures and views. Creativity, the ability to generate and develop original ideas, innovate, and be willing to disrupt conventional patterns. Optimism, the ability to sustain and communicate a sense of hope, positive attitude, and confidence in the possibility of meaningful change. And lastly, perseverance, the ability to sustain engagement and remain determined and patient, even when efforts take a long time to bear fruit. So here they all are again. Thanks for bearing with me as I took you through all those definitions. Which ones piqued your interest the most? Where did you notice yourself getting curious? Where did you notice yourself getting activated? Really pay attention to those cues and explore from there. So for me, empathy and compassion is the skill that I have been focused on, I've spoken on and written on for most of my career in my role as a UX practitioner and as an executive coach. Lately, my optimism is being tested. So that is something that I'm definitely working on. Integrity and authenticity is a non-negotiable for me. And presence is something I've been focused on for a long time, and I am slowly making progress. I would say self-awareness, visioning, and mobilization skills are probably the most common ones that I'm seeing with my clients. And I do wish more people were working on humility. If you are curious about self-reflection questions to help you assess your skillfulness in each of the IDGs, I have this paint chip thing, Skills Finder, that has questions on the back of each of the IDG skills. You can come over afterwards and take a snap of them if you're curious about a particular one. So where this comes from is that in 2021, the first IDG report was published that explains the background, method, and framework with the 5 dimensions and 23 transformational skills. And that report represents the results of 2 online surveys that were based on input from 1,000 plus participants. And now in its 3rd phase in 2023, they have launched another survey to further integrate global perspectives and on adult development in the framework and toolkit. They are aiming to engage at least 100 countries with 2 million people viewing the survey and at least 100,000 responses. And then more than 100 collaborating researchers from around the world will analyze, synthesize, and turn that into an updated framework that they're launching in October 2024. And other big initiatives for the Inner Development Goals right now are translation and localization, governance, contributor guides, better UX. You get the picture. This is very Drupal-like. Also like Drupal, they have gatherings. I just came back from the IDG Summit in Stockholm last month. It gave me a lot of hope. It was their 2nd annual conference. Their first was last year. It was over 4 days across 7 venues across Stockholm, with 1,300 people in attendance and more than 10,000 people attending online. So I hope I'm convincing you this is a movement. It's happening. There were TED-style lectures and interactive workshops and community circles and experiential spaces for each of the dimensions, and music and dancing, and a closing party at a nightclub, and an afterglow, they called it, of a harvesting of ideas and work sessions at a co-working space the final day after the conference had closed, which I thought was a really cool idea. They are really putting the IDGs into practice individually and collectively. So far, they have more than 400 hubs worldwide, and that is growing every day by geography or domain specificity, or you can start your own. And if you scan that QR code, it'll take you to all of the hubs, and you can see if there's one in your area, and you can join maybe in person, maybe on Zoom. And there are many other ways to contribute as well that you can find on that community page. So I guess this is the argument that I am making here. Inner work advances commitment to the SDGs. Commitment to the SDGs advances Drupal. We fundamentally cannot call Drupal a digital public good if it isn't explicitly advancing the Sustainable Development Goals, progress that is so desperately needed to heal what is broken in our world and develop a sustainable future. So what can you do? What is your role in all of this? Identify your strengths. Go through the IDG framework and gather which of those skills you know you have well developed, you have practiced, you lean on. Admit to your blind spots. Acknowledge where you could do better. Skills that you don't think about that often or that you haven't actively been working on in your life. Name your goals. Identify a couple of the IDGs that you really feel you could be better at and how you want to see yourself do that. And then do the work to grow your skills. Commit to practices, exercises, an intentional process by which you are going to get better at that IDG. And be a benefit to others. Be part of the solution, not a part of the problem. We're seeing that the lack of progress made toward the SDGs is because leaders, individuals, teams, companies, governments are unwilling to do the work to make the change within themselves. So take responsibility for yourself being a public good and ensure your teams, your clients, your companies, that you are doing more good than harm. There are tons of tools and resources out there for inner development. The IDG Toolkit offers a library of tools to practice the IDGs, which are filterable by skill, totally free, open source. You can contribute exercises, practices, tools to that toolkit. There's also the app 29K, which is one of the founding organizations of the Inner Development Goals. They have a great free app that has a whole bunch of different practices and exercises in there. Insight Timer is another great app that if you haven't already played around with it, I highly recommend. It's free. There's a ton of engagement on that app. And I'm also a big believer in two other frameworks that I use a lot in my coaching practice: mindful self-compassion and nonviolent communication. I share these resources with my clients all the time. My invitation to you is to start somewhere, anywhere. Whatever piece of this that I have just shared that speaks to you, please commit to exploring it. Make one piece of this a priority in your life. We need you. We need each other desperately. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you. And one last thing I will say, please contact me anytime for support with the IDG's exploration, integrating the SDGs and IDGs into your work with your clients, with your companies, specific inner development goals that you have, just to talk, whatever. I'm here. I want to support you in this work, informally, formally, it doesn't matter. If you're curious, I want to get curious with you. So please get in touch. Thank you so much again. Thank you.
Take a couple